This episode is called The Abyss Below. Welcome back to Tales from the Dark Room, where the shadows hold stories you'll wish you never heard. Tonight, we dive into the ocean's depths, where something far worse than a shark waits below the waves. It all started on a seemingly normal day in the small, sleepy coastal town of Gray Harbor, tucked away on the northwestern tip of the United States. Gray Harbor was known for its tranquil beauty. In the summer months, the town bustled with tourists, eager to bask in the sun on its pristine beaches, or take a whale-watching tour. But for those who lived there year-round, the rhythm of the tides was as familiar as their own heartbeat. The disappearance happened on a Wednesday, just as the last of the summer tourists were packing up and heading home for the fall. It was the kind of day that made Gray Harbor feel like any other ordinary small town. But for 17-year-old Danny O'Connell, this day would turn into a nightmare that no one could have predicted. Danny loved nothing more than kayaking in the calm waters of the Gray Harbor Inlet. It was his sanctuary, his place to unwind after a long day at school. But today, the inlet seemed unusually choppy. The waves were restless, crashing against each other with an almost angry sound. Still, Danny wasn't deterred. He slipped into his kayak, donned his life jacket, and paddled out into the churning waves. For a while, everything was fine. The wind whipped through Danny's hair as he battled against the waves. But then suddenly, without warning, a rogue wave hit the kayak. In an instant, Danny found himself thrown into the frigid water. He struggled to get himself upright, but the water was like a vice, pulling him down, and when he surfaced, the kayak was nowhere to be seen. Struggling to keep his head above the water, Danny realized his life jacket had been ripped to shreds. As panic started to rise within him, he began to scream for help, but his cries were lost in the roar of the wind and the pounding of the waves. No one could hear him. No one could see him. He was utterly alone in the vast expanse of the turbulent sea. Back on land, Danny's mother, Sarah, was starting to get worried. Danny had been out on the inlet for hours, and he was never one to ignore his curfew. She started to walk towards the shoreline, calling out for her son. Her heart sank with every wave that crashed onto the shore, stealing away precious minutes as the sun began its descent, casting long, eerie shadows across the beach. Sarah's worst fears were confirmed. Danny was nowhere to be seen. His kayak lay abandoned on the shore, a silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded. Fear tightened its grip around Sarah's heart. Where was her son? What had happened to him? The questions echoed in her mind, unanswered, leaving her trapped in a labyrinth of worry and despair. The search for Danny involved the entire town. Every able-bodied person joined in, combing the coastline, searching the churning waters, hoping against hope for a miracle. But as night fell and the tide went out, their spirits plummeted. There was no sign of Danny anywhere. The next morning, the town was abuzz with activity, but it was the kind of activity that accompanied grief and fear. The entire community was shaken by Danny's disappearance. Whispers of what could have happened rippled through the crowd. Had he been taken by the current? Was this the work of some crazed kidnapper? The theories swirled, but there were no answers. Then came the second disappearance, and the whispers turned to screams. To fishermen, brothers Matt and Mark Turner hadn't returned from their night fishing trip. Their boat, the oceans, grazed. When the townspeople looked inside the boat, they saw blood, a torn fishing net, and shattered oars, but there was no sign of the brothers. Fear began to grip the town like a vice. People started talking in hushed tones, exchanging nervous glances. Something was out there in the waters around Gray Harbor. Something sinister. Something that had claimed 2 lives in as many days. Sheriff Marla Williams, a woman whose strength and resilience were as vast as the ocean she now faced, knew she had to act fast. If the killer was still out there, someone else might be next. She reached out to Jonas, a marine biologist who specialized in deep-sea creatures. Together, they started to piece together what could have happened to Danny and the Turner brothers. Jonas examined the torn life jacket and the shattered boat, looking for clues. He noted the unusual damage. The kayak punctured as if by a giant beak, and the fishing boat overturned without a trace of a struggle. He shared his theory with Sheriff Marla. Whatever did this was big, bigger than a great white, strong enough to overturn a boat and snap a life jacket. But why hasn't it struck again? Marla wondered aloud. Jonas shrugged. Maybe It was a one-off, a crazed animal acting erratically. That's when Eli Walker, a weathered fisherman with eyes as deep and mysterious as the ocean itself, stepped forward. He had known the Turner brothers and had fished alongside Danny's father before. "There's something big out there," he said, his voice gravelly. "I've seen it. Most folks don't believe me, but I know what I saw. Too big to be a shark." So they decided to sail out into the abyssal trench where the boys had vanished. They had a hunch that whatever had taken Danny and the Turner brothers was lurking in these dark depths. The ocean was unnaturally silent, which was unnerving. There was not a bird to be seen, not a wave to break the surface. It was as if the sea itself was holding its breath. As they ventured deeper, the silence became oppressive, broken only by the creak of the boat and the lapping of the waves against the hull. Then it happened. The boat lurched violently as if struck by an unseen force. "What was that?" Marla cried out, gripping the edge of the boat for support. "I don't know," Jonas whispered, his eyes wide with fear. And then they saw it. Something massive brushed against the side of their boat. Something akin to the shape of a whale, but with an unearthly smoothness to its form. Whatever it was huge. So big that it dwarfed their little boat. They didn't stick around to find out what it was. They turned the boat and fled, racing back to the shore as fast as they could. But as they sailed, the creature began to rise from the depths. They risked a glance over their shoulder and saw it fully for the first time. Its form was a grotesque parody of a whale, all sharp edges and gaping voids where eyes should be. Its skin was a sickly gray, like the bottom of a cloud, but the worst part was its mouth. It was a yawning chasm lined with rows upon rows of razor-sharp teeth, and now it was rising from the deep, hungrily seeking its next meal. The boat was tossed about in the churning water as the creature snapped its massive jaws, sending spray high into the air. One of its teeth, large as a man's forearm, snapped shut just inches from where Marla was sitting. They turned and ran, the creature right behind them. The forest was dark and dense, the trees a tangled mess of limbs and leaves. The creature moved with unnatural speed and grace, crashing through the undergrowth, its heavy breathing like thunder in the forest. They could hear it behind them, getting closer, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Then, suddenly, it stopped. They risked a glance over their shoulder and saw the creature standing there, silhouetted against the dim light of the forest. Its massive jaws still open in a silent snarl. It was as if it had come to claim them, to drag them back into the darkness from which it had come. Marla, Jonas, and Eli huddled together, their breaths shallow and quick. They were trapped, surrounded by the darkness of the forest with a monster at their back. In the chilling embrace of the gray harbor night, the creature stirred, its massive form casting an ominous shadow over the terrified trio. With a guttural roar that echoed through the trees, it lunged, and in that moment, the people of Gray Harbor lost 3 more souls to the relentless abyss. The people of Gray Harbor still whisper about what waits in the abyss. The ocean gave them life, and then took it away. Some say the creature still rises on moonless nights, waiting for the next soul to drift too far from shore. This has been Tales from the Dark Room. And remember, some things should stay beneath the waves.